There's a precise moment when you lose control, and you don't even realize it happened. Louise Hay discovered this at 73. She was studying why certain relationships emotionally destroy men, and what she found goes against everything you believe about attraction, because there's a hidden chemical switch inside your brain, a switch that some women know exactly how to flip. And when that happens, you become addicted to them like a drug. But here's what no one tells you. It's not your fault. It's pure biology. And today you'll understand how this invisible switch governs your emotions without your knowledge. Have you ever felt that sensation? When a woman responds to you coldly, and suddenly your entire day revolves around trying to decipher what she meant. When she takes a long time to reply to your messages, and you keep checking your phone like an addict waiting for the next hit. This isn't weakness. It's neuroscience. Louise Hay called this intermittent reinforcement addiction, and there's a terrifying scientific explanation for it. Your brain has been programmed over millions of years to be obsessed with uncertainty, especially when it comes from someone you desire. Think of it this way: when a woman is predictable, your brain relaxes. When she's a mystery, your brain goes into full survival mode. And then something terrible happens. Your reward system, the same area that controls addictions, unleashes dopamine like a neurological cocaine rush. But there's a problem. You don't know it's happening. You think you're in love. In reality, you're addicted to uncertainty. Louise discovered this when she started studying men who were emotionally destroying themselves over specific women. Intelligent men, successful men, rational men, men who lost everything for a woman who didn't even show real interest. And she noticed a scary pattern. They had all been hooked by the same neurological trigger, the trigger of intermittent reinforcement. It works like this. When someone gives you attention irregularly, unpredictably, your brain interprets this as a life or death game. That's why you're obsessed with the message she didn't reply to, the look she didn't give you, the call she didn't return. Your ancestral brain believes your survival depends on deciphering this mystery. But here's the most dangerous part. The more distant she becomes, the more dopamine your brain releases when she finally responds. It's like an emotional slot machine. You never know when the next reward is coming. So you become addicted to the wait. And this transforms you into a version of yourself you don't even recognize. You find yourself doing things you'd never do, sending desperate messages, obsessively checking her social media, making excuses to be where she is. Louise called this emotional starvation state, a state where your rationality is hijacked by neurochemistry. But there's something even more disturbing. Some women know exactly how to exploit this, not necessarily out of malice, often unconsciously. They've learned that men respond more intensely to uncertainty than to clarity, and so they create a pattern: closeness followed by distance, warmth followed by coldness, interest followed by indifference. And your brain? It interprets this as the most important game of your life, and because, evolutionarily speaking, it was, in ancient times, securing a mate meant genetic survival, and brains that didn't obsess over this pursuit were eliminated from history. So you inherited a brain programmed to panic when it senses romantic rejection, programmed to fight desperately for intermittent female attention. The problem is that this ancient software is running in a modern world and creating a silent epidemic of emotionally dependent men. Louise realized this when she saw terrifying statistics. Men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide after relationship breakups. And most of these relationships had one pattern. The woman was emotionally unpredictable. But here's where the story gets interesting. Louise discovered that this can be reversed. When you understand the mechanism, you can disable it. Because what happens when you finally understand that intense passion isn't love? It's just your brain in a state of chemical dependence. Everything changes. Suddenly you realize that the woman who puts you on an emotional roller coaster isn't special. She just activated a glitch in your operating system. Louise used to say, "The man who understands his own brain will never again be a slave to another person's emotions." And she was right. Because when you recognize the signs, when you see the pattern happening in real time, something powerful happens in your mind. The chemical switch stops working. It's like discovering that the magician uses tricks. The illusion completely loses its power over you. But there's an even deeper discovery that Louise made, a discovery that will change how you see all your past relationships. She realized that men who are attracted to unpredictable women are actually trying to heal an old emotional wound, a wound that usually started in childhood with an emotionally inconsistent mother, or with paternal abandonment, or with conditional love. And so you grow up unconsciously seeking to recreate this pattern, trying to earn the love of someone who will never give you emotional security. That's why stable and reliable men sometimes seem boring. Your wounded brain interpreted security as unpassionate, when in fact, you're just addicted to the drama that simulates the adrenaline of the original trauma. Louise discovered that this creates a destructive cycle. You attract women who can't love you consistently, and you reject women who could give you the emotional stability you really need. It's like being thirsty in the desert and refusing clean water because you've gotten used to drinking from a poisoned well. But here's the good news. When you understand this pattern, when you see how it operates in your life, you gain a superpower, the superpower of conscious choice, because suddenly you realize that intense attraction you feel isn't intuition. It's just a biological fire alarm ringing unnecessarily, and you can choose not to respond to it. Louise used to do an exercise with the men who sought her out. She would ask them to remember the last time they became obsessed with a woman, and then she would ask a simple question: at what exact moment did you lose emotional control? And always, it was the moment the woman started behaving unpredictably, the moment she stopped replying to messages quickly, or cancelled a date without a clear explanation, or started talking about other men, or simply became more distant for no apparent reason. That's when the invisible switch flipped, and the rational, responsible, balanced man disappeared. In his place emerged someone desperate for validation, someone who would do anything to win back the lost attention. Louise called this the emotional hijacking moment, the moment your neocortex, the rational part of your brain, shuts down and your reptilian brain takes over. And when that happens, you're not yourself anymore. You're a collection of automatic chemical reactions trying to solve a survival problem that doesn't exist. But there's something even more surprising that Louise discovered. Something that will explain why you feel so good when you finally get her attention back. When a woman ignores you for days and then suddenly sends you a loving message, your brain releases a dopamine surge larger than if she were affectionate all the time. That's exactly how gambling works. Intermittent rewards create stronger addiction than constant rewards, and some women have learned this instinctively. They know that ignoring you increases your perceived value. That proximity followed by distance makes you more dependent than constant proximity. It's not malice, it's just how the human brain works. The problem is, this creates relationships based on addiction, not on real love. Real love is security. It's emotional predictability. It's knowing the person will be there when you need them. Emotional dependency is a roller coaster. It's living in a constant state of anxiety. That's never knowing where you stand in the other person's life, and the difference between the two. That's the understanding Louise gave you today, because now you know. When you feel that intense, inexplicable attraction, when a woman leaves you emotionally unstable, when you catch yourself obsessively checking your phone, it's not love, it's neurochemistry. And neurochemistry can be controlled when you understand how it works. Louise used to say that the most attractive man in the world isn't the most handsome, nor the richest. It's the one who can't be easily emotionally disturbed, because that man understood the game. And when you understand the game, you stop being played by it. But there's one last discovery from Louise that will change everything you thought you knew about relationships. A discovery about why some women feel inexplicably drawn to men they can't emotionally control. And this discovery reveals the darker side of human nature, because while you're struggling to understand why you become obsessed with unpredictable women, those same women are often dealing with the same pattern, just from the opposite side. They too were evolutionarily programmed to test the emotional strength of men, to see who will crumble under pressure and who will remain unshakable. And here's the cruel paradox. The more emotional need you demonstrate, the less attractive you become. The more you seek validation, the more she pulls away. Not because she's bad, but because the female brain was programmed to recognize emotional dependency as a sign of genetic weakness. Louise discovered this by studying couples who lasted for decades versus couples who self-destructed in months, and the pattern was always the same. long-lasting couples, both emotionally independent, destructive couples, one dependent, one avoidant. And the most ironic part, the man who most desperately wants to be loved is exactly the one who pushes real love away. Because real love can't be forced, can't be won through desperate persistence, can't be earned through emotional sacrifice. Real love only shows up when you stop needing it to feel complete. Louise used to ask a disturbing question to the men who sought her out. Do you love this woman? Or do you love how she makes you feel about yourself? And the answer always revealed the painful truth. They weren't in love with the woman. They were addicted to the validation she occasionally provided. Because when she finally replied to a message, when she finally smiled, and when she finally showed interest, and they felt important, special, worthy. But that means their self-esteem was in her hands, and anyone who controls your self-esteem controls you. Louise realized that this creates men who live in a state of emotional begging, always trying to deserve love, always trying to prove worth. And ironically, that's exactly what makes someone less worthy of love, because true love only recognizes true love. And you can't give true love when you're desperate to receive it. It's like trying to fill a leaky bucket. No matter how much water you pour in, it always leaks out through the unresolved need at the bottom. So Louise created what she called the indifference test, a simple test that revealed if you were in love or just dependent. The test was this. Imagine that this woman disappeared completely from your life tomorrow, forever. No explanation, no goodbye, no possibility of reunion. How would you feel? If the answer is devastated, lost, empty, purposeless, then it's not love, it's dependency. If the answer is sad, but still complete, still functional, still yourself, then maybe it's real love, because real love complements you. Emotional dependency defines you. And here's the difference that can save your emotional life. When you truly love someone, you want the best for them, even if that doesn't include you. When you're dependent on someone, you want them for yourself, even if it's bad for them. Louise saw men destroy entire relationships because they couldn't make this distinction. Men who suffocated women with love that was actually disguised neediness. And those women, they always ran away. Always. Because nobody wants to be responsible for another adult's emotional happiness. It's an impossible weight to carry. Louise used to say, the most attractive man is the one who would be happy alone, but chooses to share that happiness. And she was absolutely right. Because when you don't need someone to feel complete, but you choose to be with that person because they add value to your life, that's attractive. When you need someone to feel human, that's repulsive. And the difference between those two positions? It's everything. It's the difference between relationships that energize you and relationships that drain you, between women who respect you and women who manipulate you, between love that sets you free and addiction that imprisons you. But here's where Louise made her most revolutionary discovery, the discovery that explains why some men never seem to escape this destructive pattern. She discovered that behind every man's emotional dependence, there's a wounded child desperately trying to get the love they never received. And this inner child doesn't understand adult relationships. It only understands need, want, the terrifying fear of abandonment. So when a man meets a woman who activates this wounded child, he stops being a functional adult. He becomes a 5-year-old begging, please don't abandon me. And adult women, they aren't attracted to emotional children. They're attracted to men who have emotionally matured. Louise realized that curing emotional dependence isn't about finding the right woman. It's about healing the wounded child still living inside you. Because as long as that child is in charge of your emotions, you'll always be vulnerable to emotional manipulation. Always be drawn to women who confirm your worst beliefs about yourself. You'll always be a magnet for toxic relationships. But when you finally heal that ancestral wound, when you become the emotional father you always needed, something magical happens. You stop attracting women who hurt you and start attracting women who complement you. You stop being drawn to drama and start valuing peace. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy and start recognizing real love when it shows up. And that changes everything. Because suddenly, you realize you've spent years chasing illusions, years pursuing people who could never give you what you really needed. And what you really needed wasn't them. It was yourself. Louise knew this discovery would be hard to accept, because it means taking full responsibility for your emotional life. It means stopping blaming women for your self-destructive patterns. It means growing emotionally, and growing hurts. But living as an emotional child hurts more. It hurts to live on a constant emotional roller coaster. It hurts to never feel secure in relationships. It hurts to always wonder if you're truly loved or just tolerated. Louise discovered that emotionally mature men have completely different relationships. Relationships based on choice, not need. And women respond to this dramatically because they've finally found a man who doesn't need rescuing, who doesn't need constant validation, who won't have an emotional meltdown if she has a bad day. A man she can relax and be herself around without fear of accidentally breaking him. This is irresistible to mature women and repulsive to women who feed on emotional drama, which means that when you grow emotionally, you automatically filter out toxic relationships and attract healthy ones. It's like changing your emotional frequency. Suddenly you can only tune into different channels, and that's the true freedom Louise discovered. The freedom to consciously choose who you let into your life based on real compatibility, not emotional addiction. But there's one last revelation from Louise that will complete your understanding. A revelation about what really happens in a woman's brain when she meets a man who can't be easily emotionally manipulated. And this revelation will turn everything you thought you knew about attraction upside down, because when a woman meets a man she can't control emotionally, something primitive awakens in her brain, something she doesn't always consciously understand. Her ancient brain recognizes real genetic strength. Louise studied this for years. She observed how women reacted to emotionally stable men versus emotionally dependent men, and discovered something the relationship industry doesn't want you to know. Women are biologically programmed to test a man's emotional strength, not out of malice, but out of survival instinct. Because in ancient times, an emotionally weak man meant death for her and her children. So the female brain developed subtle mechanisms to identify emotional weakness and eliminate it. That's why the more you beg for attention, the less attractive you become. The more you demonstrate need, the more she pulls away. It's not cruelty, it's evolutionary programming. But here's what Louise discovered that's most powerful. When you stop reacting to her emotional tests, when you remain unwavering in the face of drama, something clicks in the female brain. She recognizes real strength, and real strength is the most powerful aphrodisiac there is. Louise used to tell the story of David, a 38-year-old executive who had spent 5 years chasing a co-worker who treated him like an emotional roller coaster. One day affectionate, the next cold. One day interested, the next indifferent. David had become her emotional slave, constantly checking if she was online, interpreting every micro-expression, living in a state of constant anxiety. Until the day he understood the mechanism, the day he realized he was addicted to intermittent reinforcement and decided to get out of the game, not dramatically, not by confronting her, simply by stopping reacting. When she sent a cold message, he responded normally. When she cancelled dates, he said, "Okay, no problem." When she mentioned other men, he didn't show jealousy. Guess what happened? In 3 weeks, she was obsessed with him. Suddenly, she was sending long messages, initiating conversations, making excuses to see him, asking why he was different, because for the first time in her life, she had met a man who didn't dance to her emotional tune, and that completely threw her off balance. In the best possible way, Louise explained, when you stop being emotionally predictable, when you stop reacting to her patterns, you become a mystery, and mysteries are irresistible to the human brain. But there's something even deeper happening. When you demonstrate real emotional independence, you activate what Louise called value recognition. The female brain perceives, this man doesn't need me to feel good. He chooses me because he wants to, not because he needs to. That's rare. That's valuable. And value is magnetic, especially genuine value. Because most men offer need disguised as love. They offer dependence disguised as devotion. But when you offer conscious choice, when you offer emotional freedom, that's revolutionary. Louise discovered that women accustomed to emotionally controlling men become completely lost when they encounter someone who can't be controlled. And this confusion, this inability to manipulate, transforms into intense attraction, because suddenly they have to use real charm, real personality, real value. not just emotional games. And this forces them to become better versions of themselves. Louise realized that healthy relationships only happen when both people are emotionally independent, when neither needs to control the other to feel secure. But to get to that point, you first need to heal the wounded child living inside you. And Louise developed a specific method for this, a method she tested with hundreds of men over decades. The method starts with a painful question. When was the first time you felt emotionally abandoned? It might have been when your parents divorced, when your mother was always too busy, when your father never showed pride, when you were rejected at school. But there was a moment when you unconsciously decided, I'm not worthy of unconditional love. And since then, you've been trying to prove that belief wrong, through relationships, through achievements, through external validation. But that strategy never works, because you can't heal an internal wound with external validation. Louise discovered that the only real cure is to become the emotional parent you always needed, for yourself. This means stopping abandoning yourself when women reject you, stopping criticizing yourself when you make mistakes, stopping seeking approval to feel valuable. It means treating yourself with the same compassion you would treat a child you love. And when you finally do that, when you become your own source of unconditional love, something magical happens. You stop attracting people who confirm your wounds, and you start attracting people who celebrate your healing. Louise saw this happen hundreds of times. Men who spent years attracting emotionally unavailable women suddenly started attracting mature, caring, stable women. Not because they changed their seduction techniques, but because they changed their emotional frequency. David, the executive from the previous story, 6 months after stopping chasing his drama queen colleague, he met an incredible businesswoman who loved him exactly as he was. A woman who didn't need emotional games to feel desired. A woman who offered stability because she herself was stable. And for the first time in his life, David experienced what it was like to be loved, not needed. Louise used to say, when you heal your need to be needed, you become irresistible to people who don't need anyone. And that's the most beautiful paradox of mature relationships. Because when two emotionally independent people choose each other, they create something that transcends need. They create real partnership. But this requires courage. The courage to give up the drama you mistook for passion. The courage to let go of the control you mistook for love. The courage to heal completely, even if it means losing people who only wanted you broken. Louise knew that not all men would be ready for this journey, because growing emotionally means letting go of excuses. It means taking full responsibility for your emotional life. It means stopping blaming women for your self-destructive patterns and starting to work on the only person you can really change, yourself. But for those courageous enough to make this journey, the reward is extraordinary. The reward is never again being a victim of someone else's emotions, never again living on an emotional roller coaster, never again wondering if you're truly loved. The reward is peace, true emotional peace. And when you have peace, you attract people who also have peace. And together, you create relationships that nourish instead of drain, that inspire instead of destroy, that heal instead of hurt. Louise discovered that mature love isn't about intensity. It's about depth. It's not about need. It's about choice. It's not about completing each other. It's about complementing. And the difference? It's everything. Because when you finally experience mature love, you realize you spent years confusing addiction with passion, drama with intensity, need with devotion, and then you laugh. You laugh at how naive you were, how you let yourself be manipulated, how you confused suffering with meaning. But it's not a bitter laugh, and it's a laugh of liberation, because you finally understood the game. And when you understand the game, you stop being played by it. Louise used to end her sessions with a transformative question. What would you do if you never again needed anyone's approval to feel complete? And that question changes everything, because suddenly you realize how many decisions you made based on the fear of rejection, how many false versions of yourself you created to please others, how many dreams you abandoned for fear of judgment. And then you start living authentically, not to impress, not to please, not to be accepted. You live to express who you really are, and that is magnetic in a way that seduction techniques never can be, because authenticity is rare, especially authenticity without a need for validation. And when you offer that to the world, when you offer yourself without a hidden agenda, special people start appearing in your life. Not people who need to be conquered, not people who enjoy games, not people who feed on drama, people who recognize real value when they see it, people who are ready for mature love, people who complement your life instead of complicating it. Louise said that this was the true revolution, to stop seeking love and start offering it, starting with yourself. Because when you truly love yourself, when you truly respect yourself, when you truly value yourself, you automatically attract people who do the same, and you repel people who don't. It's like changing radio frequencies. Suddenly you can only tune into different stations, and the stations you tune into, they're infinitely more beautiful, more profound, more real. Louise spent decades studying relationships, and her final conclusion was simple. The love you seek outside of yourself can only be found within you first. It sounds cliché, but it's pure neuroscience, because your brain can't give what it doesn't have. If you don't have genuine self-love, you can only offer need disguised as love. Need always repels real love. But when you finally heal, when you finally become whole, when you finally choose yourself, something extraordinary happens. You stop needing relationships to feel human, and you start wanting relationships to feel even more human. And that difference between needing and wanting, that's the difference between addiction and love, between dependency and partnership, between suffering and growth, between drama and peace. And now you know. Now you understand the hidden mechanism that controls attraction, the invisible switch that determines if you'll be loved or merely tolerated, the chemical switch that can liberate you or imprison you. And the choice is yours. You can continue being a victim of your neurological patterns. You can keep chasing people who trigger your wounds. You can keep confusing intensity with intimacy. Or you can make the most courageous choice of your life. Grow emotionally. Heal the wounded child living inside you. Become the man you've always needed to be. Attract the love you've always deserved. Louise knew not everyone would make this choice, because it's easier to blame others than to change yourself. It's easier to be a victim than to take responsibility. But for those who do make this choice, for those who have the courage to grow, life becomes completely different. Relationships become a source of joy, not anxiety. Women become companions, not riddles to be deciphered. Love becomes natural, not desperate. And you finally become free. Free from the need for external validation. Free from the fear of abandonment. Free from the tyranny of your own emotional wounds. Free to love truly, starting with yourself. And when you finally love yourself truly, when you finally respect yourself truly, when you finally value yourself truly, you discover that chemical switch some people use to control you simply stops working. Because you found an even more powerful key, the key to your own completeness, and that key no one can take from you, never again.